All right, so today we are talking about Blue Zone number two of five. So this is Nicoya province, which is in Costa Rica. It is the only blue zone in in the entire Central and Southern American region or continents. So it's a little bit different than any of the others. I think the cool thing about all the blue zones is that they are all so very different. I mean, there are some common themes like, plant-based diet and, not drinking a lot of alcohol or, smoking, et cetera, having an active lifestyle. But the actual specifics of each diet and kind of the nuances of their lifestyle choices are really all just kind of dramatically different. So, and we will of course see that as we go through. So number two, so last week we were in the US, we were in Loma Linda, California. If you remember, that was obviously a huge focus on plant-based diet. They also did, for the most part, embrace a kosher lifestyle. And then they were very keen on the idea of one just complete rest day, which was their Sabbath, which was Saturdays. So in Nicoya province, so Hojancha, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, that is a city on the peninsula. So it was very much isolated until the 1970s. I mean, it's still difficult to reach. You can drive there, but kind of mainland Costa Rica, but it's still a long drive. And if there's any kind of flooding, it exacerbates the difficulty of getting there. But because it is, I mean, it's gorgeous. Like if you look at pictures of it, it's got about 80 miles of just coast, just beautiful coast. With a lot of wonderful beaches. So, as any beautiful beach is wont to be, it becomes a tourist destination. So, it's the people who live there, kind of the native Costa Ricans who live there. They led a pretty sheltered, isolated existence for many, many, many years. So they developed these kind of core lifestyle and dietary habits that just remain to this day. Now, what was interesting, I was reading a little bit about kind of the background of when Dan Buettner went to Nicoya Peninsula and was kind of doing his research for the blue zones. They didn't have, basically what happened is there was kind of, the word on the street was that the lifespan in this area was exceptionally long, but because there wasn't a whole lot of kind of formal administration there, they were kind of like, all right, they took it with a grain of salt. They thought, well, maybe they're kind of, not lying, but exaggerating how old people are living to be, they're not necessarily always, it's just the record keeping is not quite as good there as it is, say, in certain parts of the U.S. or the Western world. But anyway, so he went there and they did kind of a rudimentary checking of birth records with death records, and spent a lot of time there and found out that it was in fact some of the oldest, especially men, in the entire world. So this thing about, if you look, let me move this. So it is one of the oldest settlements in Costa Rica. Like I mentioned, it's got these beautiful beaches. So I mean, the aesthetics, it's a largely agrarian economy there, but it's just absolutely gorgeous. The interesting thing, and this, I was kind of dorking out on this because I had written a paper for my master's degree about this, but people on the Nicoya Peninsula have the longest telomeres of all of Costa Rica, and some of the longest telomeres just in the entire world. Does anybody know what that actually means? No? Okay. Well, I have it sorted there, but basically the telomeres on each DNA, the tips, so there is a definite connection between the length of the tip, what's called the telomere on DNA, and how long on your lifespan, basically. So scientists and doctors can look at these telomeres, and if they're really short, that means that your biological age is probably older than you actually are. So thus your life expectancy is probably not that great. However, if your telomeres are really long, that means that your biological age is probably a little bit shorter or younger than you actually are, in which case your life expectancy is longer. So it's not always 100% correlation, but it's pretty close. So the fact that their telomeres are the longest in Costa Rica and some of the longest in the world is pretty interesting benchmark. And interestingly, another thing I will just drop in here since this is wellness, the sleep deprivation is very much tied to the length of telomeres. So, Raluca's always getting on me about sleep habits, but it's 100% true. If you are getting adequate sleep, adequate quality sleep, that will greatly affect the length of your telomeres. So, and vice versa. Anyway. So what's going on? Costa Rica, especially this kind of isolated peninsula, as you might imagine, it's not, obviously not nearly as, their infrastructure is not nearly as established and developed as in like the Western world. And Costa Rica in general spends about 15% of what the US does each year on healthcare. However, even with that number, I think we all know that our healthcare system in this country is not exactly top of the line in many ways. A man from the Nicoya Peninsula has a 2 to 3 times greater chance of reaching the age of 90 as a man the same age. If you're looking at a 6-year-old man, his chances of reaching 90 are going to be 2 to 3 times greater in this part of Costa Rica than in the US, in France, even Japan. Japanese men tend to have longer lifespans than US men, and even there, men in the Nicoya Peninsula beat them out. In terms of cancer, in Costa Rica, for some reason, there's a pretty high prevalence of stomach cancer in particular. Not really sure why. I read some about it. There wasn't a specific answer as to why that's of higher prevalence than other types of cancer, but the difference between the Nicoya Peninsula and the rest of Costa Rica, they have a 23% lower death rate due to stomach cancer. So obviously they're doing something right. So what is that? We'll talk a little bit about the entire kind of lifestyle package, but the standard diet in the peninsula, beans and rice. I mean, it's such a easy, it's just an easy breakfast, easy lunch, easy dinner, but that's pretty much what everybody in this area eats for breakfast and has for literally hundreds of years. What they do is they'll make their own tortillas out of corn. They grind up their own corn, and then they have variations of beans and rice. They typically will eat black beans more than any other type of bean, just partially because of availability, partially because of taste preferences. And black beans in particular are very high in some pretty powerful antioxidants. So that's kind of a perfect complete breakfast because you've got the whole grains, you've got the protein, you've got fiber. It's going to keep you full. It's generally, beans are actually not horribly high in calories either because you can eat a smaller amount and be pretty full. So that's kind of their standard breakfast, especially. And then they will also have that for lunches and dinners. And it's also, the Nicoya Peninsula is not an especially affluent area, particularly even, within Costa Rica. So, beans and rice, it's a pretty cheap meal. You can make a lot of it for very little money. So that's part of it, but certainly it's also just a very easy thing to make in big batches. So, you'll have like the Nicoyan women will get up at like 4 a.m, cook these huge batches of the rice, the beans, make those tortillas from scratch. I personally can think of not a whole lot of things that are better than freshly made, like homemade tortillas, either corn or flour. So this is a really filling, really hearty, but really healthy breakfast for them to get their days started. And they also use this, it's called chilero. It is kind of a condiment. It's vinegar, kind of shredded carrots, and some very hot peppers. So they do rely a good amount on spice. Spices both in terms of just being really hot, and other spices that aren't necessarily super spicy peppers, but they use curcumin, which is loaded with antioxidants. It's fantastic for brain health. And then they drink black coffee. If somebody really doesn't want black coffee, they'll maybe add a little bit of natural cane sugar to it. But they'll just have a little bit of black coffee in the morning. It's not the kind of society where people are making Starbucks runs at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. or whatever. So they get up, they've got the beans and rice, they have their coffee, and then they're kind of set for the day. Oops. Okay. Now, obviously, they are heavily influenced by the Latin American palate, with some kind of unique nuances that are specific to the Nicoya Peninsula. But a lot of it really is similar to what we were talking about with Loma Linda, and what we'll talk about with these other blue zones is the use of local produce. So it's all very fresh. Yes, there is pesticide use in Costa Rica. I'm not sure exactly how much is used in Nicoya, but you're getting this local produce that was maybe, was grown just down the road from you. So it's not going through the whole rigmarole of, packaging, shipping, storing. The US in particular, we are horrible about having produce that's like the size of your head, right? You go to the store, you want an apple, and apples are like this big. You go to a lot of other countries, and they're gonna be like this big because they're not adding really a whole lot of chemicals or, steroids or anything like that. But so you're getting this nice local produce. Yuca, of course, personally, one of my favorite foods is fried. I hate to say it, but it's fried yuca, kind of like French fries. It's fantastic stuff. Ayote, which is it's like a squash. Peppers are big. Like I said, the hotter the better. And then they also have fresh cilantro. So these are fresh. This is fresh produce that has a lot of flavor. So you don't necessarily need a massive plate of food when you've got this, fresh, explosive flavor. Onion, garlic, carrots. These are also essential ingredients. And then also the Nicoyan population, they tend to eat a lot more fruit than than any of the other blue zones, to be honest. They've got this, how awesome would it be to have like a papaya tree, or have like coconut growing like down the road from you. And then avocado, which we see on a lot of the lists, and then pineapple. If I had access to fresh papaya and pineapple every day, I don't know about you guys, I'd be pretty happy. Like I would definitely, mid-afternoon, you're kind of in a slump, find you're a little bit hungry, the average, according to the kind of average American diet, you reach for what? Potato chips, or like, if you're really good, maybe you reach for like hummus and carrot sticks. But like, if you have fresh papaya and pineapple, like there you are, that's a winner, right? So it's easy access to really good, fresh local produce that has a lot of flavor. And then the other interesting thing that's very unique to Costa Rica in general, but also the more so to the Nicoya Peninsula, is that the water, it's hard water. So it's not necessarily like if we tasted it, it would taste very strange to us, but it has far more magnesium and calcium than water, like tap water, well water, here in the States, or really a lot of other parts of the world. So, the taste it's probably an acquired taste, I would imagine. You just get used to it. It's kind of like, if you ever go to Iceland, drinking the water there, it's like having a face full of like rotten eggs, right? But the water is really fresh and very good and healthy for you. But as such, because of this kind of abundance of magnesium and calcium, they have a pretty low incidence of certain chronic conditions like osteoporosis, for example, or bone cancer. Now, the diet basics. So you may recognize this graph. So there's one for each of the blue zones, just to kind of give you all some perspective and kind of be able to compare. But again, like I was saying before, plant-based diet, it's all locally sourced. In the Nicoya Peninsula, they do adhere to a pretty strongly Mesoamerican diet with what they call the three sisters of agriculture, which is squash, corn, and beans. You see in so many recipes from this region, you see squash is a huge mainstay. It's got a lot of vitamin A. It's got a lot of vitamin K. It can be quite filling in the right circumstances, but corn is another one. Here in the States, unfortunately, a lot of corn, it's okay to eat it, but it's like 90% of all corn in the US that we can buy at the grocery store is genetically modified. But if you go to someplace like this, you're getting corn is coming straight from the source. So it's a heck of a lot healthier. It's a great whole grain. So they eat a lot of the corn, and then of course the beans. That's a huge thing. So if you look at this graph, 26% whole grains, the most common source of that is corn. So it's not necessarily things like whole wheat bread or anything like that. It's predominantly corn. They do eat a lot more dairy than any of the other four blue zones. And then a lot of vegetables. They will have a little more added sugars than some of the other blue zones, but it's generally in the form of raw sugar cane. So, at very least, it's a little more pure, doesn't have as many additives. And then, like I said before, they do eat more fruit than any other blue zone. And they also, it's kind of a small margin, but they do eat a little more meat than a lot of the other blue zones. Obviously, Loma Linda was pretty heavy on the vegetarian and vegan diet, but in the Nicoya Peninsula, or on the Nicoya Peninsula, they will eat chicken and pork. It does still tend to be more of a side dish than a main course, but they will go ahead and add a little bit of chicken and pork when the occasion calls for it, or when they have a good source. Now, in terms of lifestyle, as I was mentioning in the beginning, Loma Linda, their big lifestyle pieces were, the day of rest, family, social network, church for them was kind of the fulcrum of that. And they also, they were big promoters of kind of a healthy, active lifestyle. So not necessarily like running triathlon, they're competing in triathlons, but doing, a hike every day. They obviously were well positioned where they are in California for that kind of thing. But on the Nicoya Peninsula, some of the kind of core beliefs in terms of lifestyle are I'll come back to the first one in a moment, but yes, family-centered social network is huge there. The villages there, they're not huge, and most of the families do go back, a very long time. So there's a lot of history. Everybody tends to know each other. They all tend to work, like I said, it's an agrarian economy for the most part. So everybody's connected, and they really put family first. So meals are family, social occasions. They really this is, putting their family ahead of, career ambitions, that kind of thing. It's just like a different mentality than we have here. Hard work. I mean, they, like I said, they're usually up before the crack of dawn or right out the crack of dawn. As kids, they're kind of tasked from day one, as soon as they can walk, helping out with agriculture, helping out around the house and cooking and what have you. But it's very much, they work hard. They tend to start earlier in the day, work hard, and then, by kind of mid to late afternoon, they're done, and that's their social time. And then, because a lot of what they do is agriculture, they are outside a good amount. So vitamin D, the good old vitamin D, it just keeps coming back up, doesn't it? The connection to I won't say it's 100%, but supposedly there's a pretty solid connection between vitamin D deficiency and susceptibility to severe cases of coronavirus. Vitamin D is the most commonly prescribed supplement in the United States. And it's a very difficult vitamin one of the most difficult vitamins to get from food. So being out in the sun, just kind of naturally being out in the sun, it's also called the sunshine vitamin for a reason, because a lack of vitamin D has been linked as well to depression. They're outside a lot. They get that natural sunshine, which I think probably does lead to a little bit more just general contentment. And then, like I was talking about last week with Loma Linda, they also believe in this whole idea of eat breakfast like a king, heavy meal of rice and beans, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. So they eat a light early dinner and really kind of front load their calories earlier in the day. And then there's, going back to the top, this plan de vida. This is a big thing in this culture. It translates to a reason to live, basically a purpose. So it doesn't mean that everybody on the Nicoya Peninsula wakes up every day thinking they're going to change the world, or like they are going to find a cure for cancer, or they will someday be king, emperor of the world. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be like a really pie in the sky, crazy ambition. This is more about each person having something that gets them up each day, that drives them to continue working and providing for their families, a purpose. They want to feel like they are contributing to the greater good. The greater good it could be the world, it could be, Costa Rica, it could be the peninsula, it could just be like their little village. But they want to have a reason. That's having a purpose in life, having a drive, a reason to get up is incredibly beneficial. Without some kind of purpose, it's, your mental health starts to suffer. Emotionally, that's big baggage. So having that purpose, that's a reason to make it to 100. So that's something that I think probably is, a lot of these blue zones probably kind of naturally have, the populations probably kind of naturally have this ingrained in them, but on the Nicoya Peninsula specifically, like this is a big deal. It's a big thing for them. So let's talk. All right. I want to hear from you guys. Like I'm not asking you to identify like what your purpose in life is right now, but right now, yes, restrictions are starting to ease, but we all went through a couple of months of like some serious uncertainty and a lot of changes, and staying at home, even if you're a homebody, it can be depressing to be at home every single day and not be able to go out and do the things that you're used to doing. So, we all probably struggled a little bit mentally, emotionally, physically, maybe. What gets you through those tough times? And if you don't want to talk about what your specific purpose is, like, what do you think, how can we go about defining what our purpose is? Anybody? Lindsay, you look like you're thinking hard there.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, I think one of the scariest things for me, is the unknown. So especially, during these last couple of months, but we really haven't had an option, right? So it's just kind of been, not being scared of it or figuring, or letting it, get me anxious or, whatnot. It's, how can we get through it in a positive way, or, what can I do to make it not seem so uncertain, right? It's like what, I think kind of things like we've talked about in the past, so then what are things that, are within our control and that we can do to kind of make ourselves feel better. So I guess that's kind of how I've been juggling probably the last couple of months.
Good. Do you think that will change as things start to go somewhat back to normal, or is it just kind of giving you?
Um, I think so. I'm definitely a creature of habit. I appreciate my schedule and my routine.
Yeah.
Um, hence the giant whiteboard in my office with everything color coordinated and by dates and things like that. So,
Just being
um,
organized.
yeah, so it's been a bit of an adjustment, but I think, it's helped to, work on, being patient
Hmm.
and being flexible. So, there's been some positives that have come of it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think I would say that the purpose going through this whole time has been um, has been very good actually for myself to learn to take care of myself and,
Hmm.
and know how to for my well-being, because if I'm depressed, I'm no help to others. And of course, we don't want to be depending on people. That's one thing that probably I have heard Indian people say that, oh, I wish I would die in my sleep. So I'm not a burden on anyone, you know. But then you have
Yeah.
to. It's about not dying, but it's about living healthy way, so you can be of help to others too. And I think it has been ups and downs, but thankfully, just connecting with people
Hmm.
and the student on everyday basis has been such a plus. And and to think about that, whatever we learn, whatever, when we are encouraged and when we are happy, that I'm able to reach out to other people, because
That's
many
great.
times we keep things into bottled up in our hearts and we think we need to reach out, but you are not doing very well by yourself.
Right.
So yeah, so the purpose basically is to come out of it, or actually there's no coming out of anything. This, if this, you come out of this, there's something else to be starting. So we
Sure.
always
Yeah.
coming out of something and going into something else. So, it's been great to see people and just be able to connect.
That's
Really.
great. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's well, you're right. First of all, it's always darkest before dawn, right? There's always once you get over one hurdle, there's always another one there. It's in life is never perfect and necessarily easy. Even if I look at somebody else's life and think, God, they've got it made, chances are, I mean, not chances are, they definitely have their own struggles. So, for me personally, this whole thing, and it doesn't have to be specific to coronavirus when you start thinking about it for yourself, but one thing that has come out of it for me has been, I've been forced to kind of slow down a little bit just in terms of like schedule and other things. If you know me, I always have like 100 things going on. So it's kind of been nice to realize that it makes me feel very good to get up and just teach my kids about like, they're not running between activities, just teach them about like enjoying the simpler things of life, as cheesy as that may sound. I know a lot of people have just gone out, spent more time just outside, going to on hikes and whatever, just in appreciating nature, realizing that how to appreciate your life for what it is and not always like looking to that next thing. So there are definitely silver linings to anything, to any challenge. So yeah, so it's 3 o'clock. So I'll quickly wrap this up. But think about it, and again, it doesn't have to be anything super deep. It can be super cheesy too. I mean, you start talking about your purpose and people roll their eyes, right? But it's a personal thing, and if you can identify some kind of purpose for yourself, then you are way ahead of the game. So just think about it today, tomorrow, whenever. But if you've got something that in your heart drives you every day when you get up, then that's fantastic. So okay. Now here is a sample recipe before we go. Like I said, the Three Sisters of Agriculture, huge on the Nicoya Peninsula. So you've got squash, beans, and rice. There are slower ways to make this, but this would be something that you could just do in the microwave and would be really, really easy. But it's, nothing, these are not these are not terribly difficult ingredients to get a hold of. What drives me nuts sometimes, and maybe I don't think I'm the only person, but like if you ever go online and you search for a recipe, or you go to a cookbook and it's like, you know, easy dinners to make at home, and then inevitably the first 5 ingredients are like, you know, like quail feathers and, you know, like organic lamb's tongue, like stuff that most people don't have in their you know, in their cupboards or their fridge, or it's really expensive, or you have to go to like 5 different stores to get everything you need. So that's what I really like about this like diet. I mean, it's not a diet, so to speak, but this kind of food mentality is because it's all very standard staples, you know, that most people do have. Beans, rice, squash or avocado are probably the most exotic things on this list right here, and you can get those at any store. None of them are overly difficult to cook, and they're all pretty cheap. So this is not even something that's going to be like, you know, breaking the bank. All right. Any questions or thoughts?
I appreciate your wonderful training class.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it. It's nice for me. I enjoy reading about this stuff, so I get to do it on company time. I mean, what's not to like about that, right?
That's true.
Yeah, we thank you very much.
Nice seeing you all, guys.
Exactly.
Well, and then so next week, same time, same place, it will be about a town in Greece. So get into the Mediterranean, okay?
Okay.
Please,
Awesome.
Stephanie. Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye.